3, welcome back to Maths. Now today we are going to be carrying on with our learning about fractions. Up here we've got some vocabulary that we looked at last week. Just want you to remind yourselves of what these words mean. So we have unit fractions, which is a fraction where the numerator is 1 and the denominator is a whole number. And we also looked at non-unit fractions last week where the denominator is a whole number, but this time the numerator is greater than 1. So this is knowledge that hopefully you remember from last week, and we're going to be using this knowledge today because we are going to be doing something called finding a fraction of an amount using unit fractions today. So, yesterday, hopefully, when you looked at your Education City video, you learnt about finding fractions, unit fractions of amounts. And we're going to consolidate that learning today. To find a unit fraction of an amount, you need to learn this procedure, which is to divide the amount by the denominator in the fraction and then multiply the answer by the numerator. Now, in school we have our own little poem, shall we say, to remember this process. And we say divide by the bottom and times by the top. And you will see there I've got a picture of some shorts and a t-shirt, because if you visualise a pair of bottoms, a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, it helps you to remember this process. So yesterday, hopefully you learnt how to answer questions like this one. So, if I want to find 1/4 of 20, the first thing I need to do is to divide my amount, which is 20, by 4, because that is the denominator of my fraction. And we know our 4 times table. We know that 20 divided by 4 is 5. And once I've got my answer there, my second step is to multiply my answer by the numerator. So I would multiply 5 by 1, which gives me 5. So 1/4 of 20 is 5. Moving on to this next example. I want to find 1/5 of 30. My first step is to divide my amount by the denominator, which is 5. And again, hopefully we know our 5 times table, and we know that 30 divided by 5 is 6. And then my next step would be to multiply the answer, which is 6, by my numerator, which is 1. 6 times 1 is 6. So the answer to what is 1/5 of 30, the answer would be 6. Okay. That was a bit of revision of the skills that you learned yesterday. And now we are going to apply some of those skills to some reasoning questions. And these are the kind of questions that you have on your worksheet on our website for today. This first question says, D'Angelo thinks he has found 1/3 of 18 using place value counters. Is he correct? And then you have to convince me. Okay, now, this is what D'Angelo has done. He has made himself 3 groups because the denominator in his fraction is 3. So he's found 3 groups and he has split the counters that he has got. He has split them evenly between the 3 groups. And that is why he thinks he has answered the question correctly. But if you think back to what you know about fractions and about the denominator in particular, we have to remember that this number here tells us that the whole has been split into 3 equal parts. They have all got to be the same. And even though there are 3 groups with 3 counters in, if you look very carefully at the counters in each group, you will hopefully spot that they are not worth the same value. Okay, so this group here, although it has 3 counters in it, actually the value of that group is 12 because there's a 10 in there and 2 ones. This group has 3 and this group has 3. So he has not answered this question correctly because his 3 groups are not equal. They're not the same. What D'Angelo has to do to answer this question correctly is actually to exchange his tens counter for 10 ones down there. So if I get rid of the tens counter there, what I can do is exchange it for these 10 ones down there. First of all, I can make this first group equal to the other 2. And then what I can do is I can divide out, I can share out each of the remaining counters, one at a time, into the groups. And hopefully, when we get to the end and they are all shared out, we will see that there are 6 counters in each group. Okay, so is he correct? No. He is incorrect because the counters in each group were not all worth the same value. He needs to exchange the 10 counter for 10 ones, and then he can have 6 ones in each of the 3 groups. So if I want to know what 1/3 of 18 is, 1/3 of 18 equals 6. Okay? Now there are a few of that type of question for you to have a go at on your worksheet, and hopefully that example has helped you to be able to solve those questions by yourself. We're going to move on now to another type of question to do with fractions of amounts, and that's this one here. This can look quite daunting when you first see it in front of you. It can look quite complicated. My advice would be to read this question out loud so that you remember what all the individual parts of it mean, and then you'll find it much more easy to approach as a whole question. So this question says 1/3 of 24, then there's this symbol here, is greater than 1/4 of something. Okay? We have looked at these symbols a lot this year, greater than and less than, and we did use Charlie Croc to help us remember. When you have the jaws of the crocodile open, they open up towards the greater number, the bigger number. So, to solve this sort of question, the first thing we need to do is to work out the value of the complete half of the statement. So this statement here, this symbol is in the middle. This half of the statement is complete. There's nothing missing. So we can calculate 1/3 of 24. And to do that, we take our amount and we divide it by the denominator. We know our 3 times table. 24 divided by 3 is 8. And then we take our answer and we times it by the numerator, which gives us 8. So this half of the equation, and you can jot down your answer on the actual question. The value of 1/3 of 24 is 8. So now we know that this half of the statement needs to have a greater value than that half of the statement over there. So we need to find a number, a whole number, that will fit into this box that will end up being smaller than the number 8. There is more than one possible answer that you can have. I'm going to give an example of, I'm going to try the number 16. I'm going to try and find 1/4 of 16 and see what it shows me. So, if I was going to do 16 divided by 4, which is my denominator, I know that is 4. And then if I times the answer by my numerator, which is 1, I get the answer 4. So I could put that in there. So a quarter of 16 is 4. I can put my whole number 16 up there, and now I have completed that statement. So 1/3 of 24, which is 8, is greater than a quarter of 16, which is 4. That is quite a tricky concept, and there are some examples in your worksheet pack to have a go at. Give it a go yourself. Try and use the tips that I've given you, and hopefully over time, as you practice, you'll become more confident with that type of question. There is one more example to go through today, and it is this kind of question here. This says that Jasmine runs a fruit stall, and at the end of the day, she has 1/10 of her fruit left that she hasn't sold. And this is a visual representation of the fruit that she has left. And the question is saying, how much fruit did she start with altogether at the beginning of the day? And you've got to explain your answer to that question. Now, this is thinking about fractions in a whole different concept, because we don't have here what she started out with. We've got to find the beginning of the question. What we have here is the end. Okay? So, we need to work out exactly how much fruit she has at the end of the day simply by counting it. Okay? So if you count up the pieces of fruit, you will hopefully find that she has got 7 pieces of fruit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's what she was left with. Now, this vocabulary here, 1/10, essentially means that we have done some dividing by 10 to end up with this 7. So in order to find out how much fruit she had at the beginning of the day, we need to multiply this number by 10 so that we know how much she started with. So, underneath here, at the beginning of the day, she had 70 pieces of fruit because she has 7 of them left. And if I use my knowledge of vocabulary and I multiply 7 by 10, then I know that she had 70 pieces of fruit at the start of the day. Once again, there are some examples of this kind of question for you to have a go at in your worksheet pack. This is the first video of this week to do with fractions of amounts. I'll be back in a couple of days' time with another video, and we'll go over some of this learning again and we'll introduce the next bit. But good luck, and I hope to see you all soon.